Welcome to Ustick Road Church of the Nazarene in Caldwell, Idaho. This is the Sunday morning service. And now your speaker, Senior Pastor Brian Dyer.
Well, let's jump over to 2 Samuel and continue our journey in chapter 16. Ready? When David had gone a short distance beyond the summit, there was Ziba. Now, let me remind you what's going on here. His son Absalom has taken over Jerusalem, and David is in flight. He's running. He's scared of his son. Absalom had absolutely killed his brother because of an injustice that David had ignored, and now David has taken flight to flee for his life from his son. Pretty intense. So this is where he's at right now. As he's fleeing, he goes a short distance from the summit, and there was Ziba, the steward of Mephibosheth. This was one of Jonathan's boys, the only living relative of Saul who had survived the slaughter by some of David's loyal men against his own wish. There was the steward of Mephibosheth waiting to meet him. He had a string of donkeys, saddled and loaded with 200 loaves of bread, 100 cakes of raisins, 100 cakes of figs, and a skin of wine. The king asked Ziba, "Why have you brought these?" And Ziba answered, "The donkeys are for the king's household to ride on, the bread and fruit are for the men to eat, and the wine is to refresh those who become exhausted in the wilderness." Duh. Right? I mean, why did you bring? I bring them so you could ride on them and you could eat the food and you could drink the wine. Why did you think I brought it? Yeah, David's thinking, what's the motivation behind this? And Ziba's saying, food is to eat, donkeys are to ride. The king then asked, "Where is your master's grandson?" Ziba said to him, "He is staying in Jerusalem because he thinks today the Israelites will restore to me my grandfather's kingdom." So Mephibosheth is hoping that he's going to be restored as king. Fat chance of that. Absalom just kicked his father out. You know, he's not likely to bring back in the king's grandkid to take over instead of him. He just staged a coup. But hope springs eternal. "I humbly bow," Ziba said. "May I find favor in your eyes, my lord the king." So here David is, and as he's fleeing for his life, he finds an ally. Somebody who says, you know, you've been wrong. King David, we are your supporters. We are loyal to you. And we know that this is a bad thing. Praise the Lord. It's great that he has that support. As King David approached Bahurim, and a man from the same clan as Saul's family came out from there. His name was Shimei, son of Gera. And he cursed as he came out. He pelted David and all the king's officials with stones. Though all the troops in the special guard were on David's right and left. As he cursed, Shimei said, get out, you murderer, you scoundrel. The Lord has repaid you for the blood you shed in the household of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. The Lord has given the kingdom into the hands of your son Absalom. You have come to ruin because you are a murderer. So as he walks along, he meets this guy who gives him all these supplies, and then the next guy he meets, boo, king of rubbish. Then Abishai, son of Zeruiah, said to the king, "Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and cut off his head." So this guy comes out, and he's throwing a fit, and one of David's men says, I'll take my sword and cut his head off. And that's another reference, but it's a lot older. But the king said, "What does this have to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? If he is cursing because the Lord said to him, 'Curse David,' who can ask, 'Why do you do this?'" David then said to Abishai and all his officials, "My son, my own flesh and blood is trying to kill me. How much more than this Benjamite? Leave him alone. Let him curse, for the Lord has told him to. It may be that the Lord will look upon my misery and restore to me his covenant blessing instead of his curse today." So David and his men continued along the road, while Shimei was going along the hillside opposite him, cursing as he went, and throwing stones at him and showering him with dirt. I just picture him walking along the ravine and this guy just running along like a little troll, kicking up dirt and throwing stuff around and cussing and yelling. The king and all the people with him arrived at their destination exhausted. People like that will exhaust you, right? And there he refreshed himself. Meanwhile, Absalom and all the men of Israel came to Jerusalem. Ahithophel was with them. Then Hushai, the Archite, David's confidant, went to Absalom and said to him, "Long live the king! Long live the king!" Absalom said to Hushai, "So this is the love you show your friend? He knows he's loyal to David. If he's your friend, why didn't you go with him?" Hushai said to Absalom, No, the one chosen by the Lord, by these people, by all of the men of Israel, his I will be, and I will remain with him. Furthermore, whom should I serve? Should I not serve the son, just as I served your father? So I will serve you. A little bit of treachery going on there. He's gonna trick him and lure Absalom into thinking that he's loyal to him. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for your blessing, and I praise you, dear God, for Lord, for your loyalty to us in spite of this world's divided loyalties. I give you the praise for this time. I pray, dear God, that you would hide this speaker behind the cross, Lord. We know that you have a word for us this morning, and I pray, dear Lord, that you would bring it, not me, that you would speak to our hearts what each one of us needs today. And Lord, may we rejoice in the independence we have from the sins in the past, dear God, and may we look forward to the future. In Jesus' name, amen. I was looking today because of, when I went into the Navy, the guy in charge of our unit was doing like a talk, right? And as he talked, he said, how many of you are here for this and that? And he asked people what their motivation was. And he said, there are people here, a lot of you are coming here for an education and all these kind of different things. And he said, and guys are raising their hands for whatever reason. And he said, not a lot of flag wavers left in the country anymore. People who enter out of patriotism. Which I was like going into the Navy thinking I'm serving my country, and I'm going in as a flag waver, And so the first thing he did was like punch me in the kneecap, It's like not a lot of flag wavers, and I'm like, now you're just insulting me. So, I was proud to be serving my country. I was proud to be in that position, and I wasn't angry. I was sad that people would take the position that they had taken. And I am still proud to live in our country. And I'm proud of the United States. Not to say it doesn't have its problems. It's a country, man-made. It's got all of its rules and regulations, man-made, just like every other country. But it's the best one on the face of the planet in my book, and I'll go with that. And I'm happy for our foundation, who we are. And I was thinking and looking through some of the stuff, some of these different terms. Ramona, did your kids use a dummy? Yes. See? Did anybody's kids use dummies? And see, the British call a pacifier a dummy. A dummy. Yeah. I know, that's just wrong. They call a garbage can a dustbin. A dustbin. Let's see. A cookie. You know what they call it? A biscuit. That is so wrong. They call your sweater a jumper. Go put your sweater on. Tell your son. You can go to, next time you tell him to go put on a sweater, say, go put on your jumper. I would say, I'm leaving. I want to be a part of another family. A diaper is a nappy. A nappy. Put a nappy on your child. No. They call Jell-O jelly. They call, of course we all know this one. This is one of the grievous offenses of the United Kingdom. They call soccer football. If not for all of these reasons, and there are multitudes, I got a whole bunch of pages of these different things where the British mess up our language. And I thought, if nothing else, how many of you got up and had a cup of coffee this morning? Yeah, how would you have liked to have gotten up and had to have tea? I tell you what, I praise God for the liberation. That's right. That we had to rebel against the British, those reasons alone are enough. I think you take nothing else but the coffee versus tea, I'm in. That was enough of a reason. But I looked back through, and I looked up this Boston Massacre. I don't know if I printed off the page. Yeah, I did. The Boston Massacre. Have you guys heard of that? The Boston Massacre. Do you know what the British called it? The Incident on King Street. The Incident on King Street. When Nancy and I, not Nancy, but Brianna and I, when we went to the Ukraine, when we went over there, we found out that the United States lost 670,000 men in World War II. The Soviet Union lost 30 million in World War II. And we think of ourselves as being the people who came in at the World War II at the end, and we are, to come in and tilt the tide, to make the big difference there. And we did. The Japanese had woken the sleeping giant. And America came in and made a profound impact. It would have undoubtedly turned out different had we not entered into the war at all. The Soviet Union barely acknowledged the United States as participating in World War II. We get a cameo by them. We get like a little participation ribbon on their part. They call the beginning of the World War II the Great Patriotic War Against the Fascist Regime. A lot more dynamic than our name. When I looked at this, when I looked at the Boston Massacre, and the British called it the Incident on King Street. Boston Massacre sounds a lot more dramatic than Incident on King Street. Does it not? I mean, by those two titles, it brings up two different images in my mind. One looks heinous, and the other one looks like, it was an incident. It was probably somewhere, it was actually somewhere in the middle. There was the British had set up the taxation. We all know about the taxation without representation, and Americans are throwing a fit. The British had this, I forget the name of it right now. They had a tax that would go on against imported goods. So the British would make something, send it to America, and then they would put a tax on the product that they were mailing to us, and a tariff on that. And in Massachusetts, they threw a fit. People from Massachusetts are always rebels. They don't listen. They're rebellious by nature. And so anyway, they sent out this Massachusetts letter. They circulated, told people, don't buy anything from these merchants because they are in the king's pocket, and King George is just taxing the dickens out of us on these certain products that we buy when they bring them in. And so there was a lot of heated stuff went on, and the British sent in soldiers to ensure that. And well, it was a pretty good gripe, because the Boston letter said, you're not taxing any other British citizens, just us. You're picking us out because of these guys bringing in stuff, and it's not fair. So they had to bring in soldiers to ensure and protect, and as a matter of fact, it was actually more of the merchants than it was the government. And then one poor soldier was on patrol, guarding the docks, and he gets confronted by another guy, and the soldier gets offended, words exchanged, all kinds of stuff, hits him in the head with his musket, and knocks the citizen to the ground. And this mistake on this young man's part brought about a whole bunch of people. They got in their faces. A bunch of soldiers came out, and then they 7 or 8 of them fired their muskets into the crowd and killed several people. And that became known in the United States as the Boston Massacre, and in the United Kingdom as the Incident on King Street. 6 of the 8 men that were tried were acquitted. Their lawyer defended them so well. Their lawyer, John Adams. Just a curious thing there, just so you'd want to know. But I thought the interesting thing there was the perspective. The perspective. I mean, from where you take it makes all of the difference in the decision that you draw. From your vantage point. When David is leaving the city, he's confronted by 2 people. One of them blessing him, and another one cursing him. In the same circumstance and in the same situation. When Nancy and I were youth pastors over at Lakeview, we went on a trip, and we took a bunch of teens. And so we said, well, we're going to take these teens. We need to take enough supervisors. So we took a group of helpers to help us to corral the teenagers. And so we gave them all muskets. We should have, perhaps. We took all these guys, and we had somebody when we got back said, You took too many people with you. I mean, with all the kids gone and with all the helpers gone, it really impacted the service because there were too many people gone. And they were really frustrated with us, and they voiced this to us. And then we had a parent say to us, how come you only took that a number of supervisors? You should have taken more helpers. You didn't have enough people to help you out with the number of kids that you had. And I said, what do I do? So we were criticized in the same circumstance for taking too many people and not taking enough people. When I first got to the church, we had a couple here, George and Mabel Nichols. They would sit right over there, and George would tell me, he said, listen, when you set the temperature in the sanctuary, if I'm hot and she's cold, it's perfect. Try to get that right. I mean, you want it to be the right temperature. Okay, I'm going to be hot. She's going to be cold. Now, if I'm not hot, it's too hot. It's too cold. Whatever it is, you get the analogy. He's saying, I'm going to be hot. She's going to be cold. Okay, so let me jump on. How do you approach circumstances in today's society that are just confusing? Are we not inundated with them? Our political system is a mess. You know, the way that people approach stuff. And I thought, I want to give you some handles on this stuff. At least maybe a little. Okay, ready? First, approach with humility. Approach with humility. When you're in a confusing situation, you're not sure what's right, approach with humility. Positional truth is half truth. You follow that? Positional truth is half truth. If you believe that you take up a position, and it doesn't matter what it is, you can take up any of the hot topics in our country today. And when you come up with whatever you come up with, it's going to be a half truth. It's going to be a half truth. Half truths are what? Whole lies. Because what we do is we minimize anybody else's perspective but our own. The people who are telling David good things were minimizing the oppositional concept. And this is something that we find, and it's a political ploy. It's real big, but it can also be any place that we want it to be. We get so ingrained in our own opinion that we think our opinion is fact. And when we articulate that, we have to minimize and devalue all of the opinions that are not our own. And devaluing another's opinion is not a Christ-like position. You follow that? It's not truthful. It is dishonest. When you devalue somebody else's opinion in order to make yourself feel good about your own spot, and I find this too, people that are the most defensive usually have the weakest position. If you can't entertain a concept that somebody else brings to the table, then it's probably because you're not sure of what you believe. If you can entertain what somebody else has, you know, one of my profs at BSU was an atheist, and he and I would have the best wars. We would fight. It was great. I loved it. And he would antagonize me too. He would say something completely obnoxious, and then he would say, what do you think, Mr. Dyer? He would say, God doesn't exist because of this or that reason. And he would say, what do you think, Mr. Dyer? And I would say, well, I think that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You know, and we would have this great battle. You know, and he loved it. He loved it, and I loved it too. I enjoyed it. And we would have this discussion, and he would be mean to some Christians, and I would kind of they would look to me to defend the position if it was defensible. And I would say, you know, he got into evolution, and I said, well, you know, it's like saying that he said no God, and I said, it's like, you know, the analogy of that's an explosion in a print shop and you get a newspaper. You know, a creation without God is just ridiculous. You know, unguided ignorance brings about intelligence. I don't even understand that. And so we would have these great discussions and dialogues. And then I got into logic. I got the highest grade in the class. He just loved me. You know, so we had a great time. But we respected one another in spite of the fact that we passionately differed with one another. Do you follow that? You can disagree completely and be respectful and kind. You know, and you can even like each other. You can love each other and hate one another's position. Okay, you can only do that with humility. You can only do that with humility. If you are convinced that no opinion is right but your own, you're going to say goofy stuff and be wrong. Here's the truth that's most important. God's truth. Because God's truth is not subjective. It's not dependent upon you and I. What God establishes as truth is greater than my truth. You know, when God created the world, He looked around at it and He said this, and He said it was good. He looks at the world, He makes it, He says, this is good. And I think, what does that mean? It's good. What does it mean? How could it be good or bad when you make something? If you have a basketball, is it good or is it bad? It's a basketball. Is it a good basketball or a bad basketball? It's a basketball. There is no good or bad. So when God makes the world, what is He talking about when He says it's good? It means one thing. You ready? It means, I like it. That's what it means. And what's the most important? Why? Because God made the world. He calls dibs on being the one who calls what good and bad is. You know? He says, you know, I get to call the shot. And when God calls the shot, it's really not even open to my interpretation anymore. It's not for me to define right and wrong. It's for me to discover it. I'm on a process of discovery to find out now what God says is right and wrong, rather than to define it for myself. When David's being attacked, it's not the compliments, the insults, both alike are perspective. I put this down. We are all hypocrites, but I changed that word on your sheet. Underachievers. We are all underachievers. I looked at the DMV photo. You know, I thought, there's an underachiever picture. You know, you look at your picture, your driver's license, and I always think, man, that was a bad day. You know, everybody always thinks that, don't you? I mean, that was a bad day. And I thought, you know, on our journey as Christians, who we are, what we're trying to be as Christians, who we're trying to be, we're all underachievers or hypocrites. You can use either word you want to. I thought about in so many different capacities where we're all hypocrites anyway. You know, I tore out. I shared this with you years ago. I took out the hot water heater. I had to change it out under my house. So I took out the old hot water heater, and lo and behold, there was a second hot water heater tank underneath my house. So I took it out. It had been left out because they weren't able to get it out at that time. So I had 2 hot water heater tanks sitting in my backyard. Do you know what you need to make a solar hot water heater? 2 hot water heater tanks. That's it. And guess what I had? 2 hot water heater tanks. You know how hard it would have been for me to make a solar heater? I did a paper in college on what's the best power sources. You know, I was trained in nuclear power, so then I thought, nuclear power, but you have radioactive waste and different difficulties associated with it. What's the best power sources? Coal, then you have the pollution, of course, with that. The best power source? Solar power. It's the very best. I have no doubt about that. It's clean. It's the way that the Lord powers the earth. It's wonderful. So I had these 2 tanks, so I could build a solar hot water heater, which is fantastic because it fit with my philosophy of solar power. Except I didn't want to. And so I didn't. I didn't build it. Why? Because I think that I like solar power, but I really don't. Because I don't have it on my house yet. I don't have any solar power there. So when I say that I'm a real fan of it, I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. I don't really mean it, because if I really meant it, I would have it on there, wouldn't I? I mean, wouldn't you have solar power, solar cells up on your house if you really believed in it? Only ones that I know of are John and Chris, and they don't do it because they're trying to save the environment. They're just capitalists. If you really believed in that, that's what you would do. We would all be driving electric cars, and we would be making all these differences, and we would recycle, and we would be doing all these things. So we say that we're trying to do something, but we really don't believe it. But it's the same thing is true. How many of you eat right? We all know we should. You're a hypocrite. Realistically, we are consumed in hypocrisy in our day-to-day life. But I don't like to call it hypocrisy. I like to call it underachiever. When I was in nuclear power school, another one, my chief called me in, and he said, "You are a classic underachiever." And I said, "Yes, classic." That we are underachievers, that we live below where we know is it's just a journey in life. It's just a journey in life, but it also helps us to set goals. It gives us directions in the purposes that we do. So it's not necessarily bad. But that we won't always live up to what we know, you never will. Hopefully you know more than you can live up to. And if not, then you need to expand your horizons and you need to learn more. So when we are confused, approach situations with humility. Then approach them with gratitude. With gratitude. When we look at our own country, when we look at our situations, when we look at the things that we're going through, are we grateful for who we are? Are we grateful for the things that happen to us? When something bad happens, people go, "Oh, why did this happen to me?" I always think, why not? Why not happen to you? You or me, somebody else, something bad happens. Bad stuff happens to everybody. Why would we think that we're exclusive from that? Everybody's going to have yucky stuff happen. But stuff doesn't happen. What we're looking for sometimes is equitable versus fair. This is something that I defined for you. Equitable versus fair. When your kids were little, you would give one a cookie. You had to give the other one a cookie. It had to be exactly equitable. Exactly equitable. And people act like if it's not equitable, it's not fair. Somebody got something I didn't get, so it's not fair. It's not fair. But equitable is not fair. You follow that? Fair is not equitable. You go, Brian and Matt come over to my house, and I go, here, Matt, here's a sandwich. Matt says, thank you. I was starving. And I go, here, Brian, here's a sandwich. He says, I just ate before I got here. I don't want a sandwich. And I go, okay, fine. I'll give you 2 sandwiches, Matt. And he goes, thank you. And I go, here, I'll give you 2 sandwiches. And Brian says, I didn't want the first sandwich. Please don't give me another sandwich. And I say, eat this sandwich. I want to be fair and equitable. But I'm giving Matt 2 sandwiches. You eat 2 sandwiches. And Brian says, I don't want 2 sandwiches. And I said, I'm going to give you a 3rd sandwich if you don't eat that second one. Fair means that everybody gets what they need, not that everybody gets exactly the same. You get what you need in order to survive. You get what you need in order to thrive. You get what you need in order to be blessed. God has given us what we need. You don't have as much as all the rich guys. Who cares about that? Who cares about that? Why? Get off the equitable thing. We don't even need it. Approach it with humility. I am grateful for what I do have, rather than envious and griping about what I don't. And when we approach any difficult situations with that, and we are praising God for the blessings that we have, our thinking is different. Our thinking is different. Approach situations to Christ. Represent Christ. And then also, remember that God's eyes see bigger than ours do. When I was looking at the situation with Absalom killed his brother Ammon. And then Absalom died. Who becomes king after David? Solomon. I wonder, was Solomon the rightful heir? Or would that have been Ammon? Or would that have been Absalom? Was the way of Solomon precipitated by the death of his older brothers? Did it work out the way that it was supposed to work out because of these situations, albeit some of them turned out? God can use everything, good or bad, to the will of His kingdom. I believe that. So we can trust that all things are working together for good. So when we approach a situation and it doesn't go the way that we want, we need to remember we represent Christ. So we need to approach it with humility. We need to be gracious. We need to be kind. And we need to understand that God's got a bigger perspective than we do. And we don't have to win every single battle. We don't have to have every single issue go our way. It doesn't have to be the case, because God is still in control. And we're going to trust that into His hands, anticipating what He's going to bring to pass. So I brought those to you just as because you will run across situations and circumstances throughout the course of your life where it won't be good, it won't be something that you like, but the way that we approach it makes all the difference. The way that we behave, the way that we interact with the world around us makes all the difference. And it makes all the difference to the people who are watching us. What kind of a testimony we have. Praise the Lord. You and I have every reason to be grateful. We have every reason to be happy. We have every reason to rejoice.
Thanks for joining us today. You can find Ustick Road Church of the Nazarene on the web at usticknaz.org and on many social media sites at usticknaz. Thanks, and God bless.